Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palomba. Now today we're going to be talking to Dr. Tali Lando Aronoff, author of To Hell and Back, Doctor and Patient, Wife and Mother, and Dragon Slayer. Tali, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the last time that we spoke, you were just formulating a plan to publicize your book. What has transpired since then?
Well, it's been a really exciting ride.
Yeah.
The book came out in May, but because I was publishing it on my own, I had to make the rain. Basically, there was no big book tour planned out for me, and so my goal was really to reach a wider audience. Women like me who were getting diagnosed at young ages, their families, and just people even going through a life-transforming event, and what transpires afterwards. So I started by speaking at local Barnes and Nobles and, even for schools that I had some connection with. But I also, one thing snowballed into the next, and a lot of my widespread reach was through social media.
Interesting. So with these book tours and reaching out to people, was it kind of surreal for you? Because you're kind of in this office or in your hovel writing and typing, and you don't know how people are going to resonate with this. And then you kind of expose yourself, right, to kind of your audience. What was that like for the first time, kind of reaching out to people who had read your work?
Well, it is very raw and honest. And so what I found is that I kept waiting to feel uncomfortable or to feel that I'd crossed a line, which is, definitely a fine line when you're talking about I'm a surgeon, there's a certain professionalism, and would revealing too much about me in a personal sense somehow compromise my relationship with patients and really the patient's parents, because I deal with kids, so they're not reading the story.
Right.
And what I kept on finding was the total opposite. The more honest that I was, either in public speaking or when parents would ask me about it, the more engaged they became, because the patients' families that I deal with, they're young mothers like myself, and the relatability actually enhanced my relationships with them more than made it feel like there was an awkwardness. And I felt the same way when I was speaking in public, that there was no question that anyone ever asked me that I felt, oh, this is an area I don't want to go into, or that I felt nervous about.
Right. There are so many instances and moments in your chapter where it crosses the boundary between being serious and being comical and kind of having a good time with something that otherwise is, very tragic for a lot of people. Were there certain portions of the book that people kept bringing up that really resonated with them? Any patterns that you found?
Well, there was one particular story that many people just said, I just laughed out loud at, and it's so awkward, but there's this part where my mother talks about wanting to donate her nipples, like a nipple transplant, and the obvious implications to your spouse for that concept, and how horrifying it is to have that conversation with your mother, and then actually explain to her why it's not a good idea. Not that it's even a thing, by the way.
Sure.
But even in my synagogue, one of our family friends came up to me, a male, by the way, and he's a urologist, and he's my older brother's age, and he just was like, oh my God, I read that section, and I just could hear your mom. So there's a very real tone to it. So I think one comment that I kept getting again and again, and it's exactly what I wanted, was, I laughed out loud and I cried out loud.
Wow.
And it didn't have to be from someone that had breast cancer. I think you start with this myopic view of how something that you do in life might impact people, and then it just expands from there. And that's the most exciting part of all of it. Was one time a pediatric neurosurgeon from our hospital, whose sister-in-law and mother were actually going through different really severe illnesses, and he told me he read the book and he just felt, well, I know you and I see you on the other side of this, and it gave him this hope that you can get through something that seems so impossible. So just that's steps removed from, it's not breast cancer, it's not a family member or a friend of someone with breast cancer, it's just a journey that could be transformative and you think would just knock you down, and then to see somebody being humorous about it. And don't get me wrong, I cried. It was not pleasant. I was not always put together and happy, but sometimes the ironies and the funny parts just shone through and you couldn't help but recognize them.
Right. I think sometimes when we write or work on something, we're not sure how people are going to respond to it.
Yeah.
We think even less about how we're going to respond to it and kind of how things kind of come full circle. Your book's been out for a few months. You've had people comment and talk to you. What have you learned about yourself from this experience, from starting to write with it and then getting the feedback that you're getting, which has been so positive and so gracious?
I think one thing is that I really love interacting with people on a wider scale. I think that's something I always knew about myself. I like to talk and have people just ask questions and go the extra step. But one thing that is, so I come from a family of pretty high achievers.
Yeah.
I have 3 brothers, and no one's impressed by anything that you do. I mean, you could be a surgeon, whatever, sure. You wrote a book, whatever.
Right.
You went through breast cancer, you had kids, and the surgeon, and the breast cancer, and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, what have you done lately?
Right.
So my middle brother, who I'm pretty close with, when I started to tell him that I'm going to be talking about my book, he said, well, what is your point? What is your whole point from all of this? And I thought, well, it's in the book. What I said my point in the book. He's like, no. No one wants to hear what's already there. You need, what is your bigger message? Where are you going with all of this? And that was a journey that took a long time to come to the story beyond it. And it's evolving. And it evolves a lot from what feedback from other people, the questions that they ask. And I feel like now I have this whole other message, but it started off from him just challenging me to have something more.
So from taking up the gauntlet, taking up the challenge to have something more, what have you done aside from your book to kind of promote the message that you've been promoting over the last few years now?
So, the message was evolving as I was writing the book. But the book itself was only, from May until now.
Right.
So I thought, if I'm going to try to get a word out about who am I? Like, why does anyone care?
Right.
I mean, a lot of people have had cancer. A lot of people have had breast cancer. A lot of doctors write about themselves. Like, it's all been done before. I had to have a persona that's interesting or some story to tell. And so I started with social media because, that's the tool that we all have access to.
Yeah.
You don't have to be famous. You just have to have something interesting that people want to pay attention to or something unique. And so I started building up a social media presence really from scratch. I mean, from picture number 1 of, me opening my box of books. I thought, this is where it all starts.
Yeah.
And it has taken on this whole life of its own, where I really look at my life and I try to think, what can you extract?
Yeah.
And it applies to everyone. What can you extract from your daily experience that to you might seem somewhat commonplace or monotonous, that's really impactful to people's lives?
Right. What platforms are you currently using on social media to engage with people?
So it's mainly been Instagram because I feel like the visual appeal, Twitter I still don't really understand. I know that people think of funny comments to say or important comments to say, but it's all verbal. And I just kept thinking of images or clips or, one of the ones from the hospital that was my absolute favorite. And I know it doesn't really directly relate to the book, but one of the big messages that I have extracted from my experience is about the nuggets in your life.
Yeah.
What is it that you can take to make yourself happy within the framework of your daily life without doing a major overhaul? Like, you have this life-changing experience and people want you to just drop it all and reset and now focus on what's important or have a greater a greater goal in mind. Well, what if you really liked your life? What if you felt like your life was on point? So how can you still be different and have a wake-up call without just chucking it all and moving to Tahiti or something, you know?
Right.
And so it just became looking around, like paying attention to those moments in your day. They happen. They might happen only once a week. They might happen right after a lot of crappy stuff happens or stress. But if you could just focus on it just for a minute. And that became, for me, a visual depiction. So this one day, I'm in the operating room. It was a really stressful day. And I thought, what if we could form a love train? An operating room love train. And just get everybody in. And people of the world, you know, I just couldn't get the song out of my head. And so I had a little bit of a stumbling block because you're not allowed to film in the OR. So that was problem number one. Right. Problem number two is that the operating room nurses are not allowed to leave the operating room during the day. So I had to get this group together. So I basically got permission. It was a nice sunny day to take a bunch of my wonderful OR staff and nurses and bring them out in front of the hospital, and we formed a love train. And I kind of placed them in different spots, and so it looked spontaneous. And then I found someone to film it, and it was so exciting and great. And I thought somehow it had its life of its own. I mean, I think my point was somehow to bring it back to the book, but I didn't. But it was more just like, okay, these moments are here, and you just have to really harness them, and you have to push your comfort level, because that was just a crazy thing for me to do. But once I got people going, when we got back inside, some of the nurses who had been in the operating room or on a break or not there, they were just like, how come you didn't include us? So I just, I was like, okay, on the next one. And it just kept really getting a life of its own in a positive way.
So this idea of the next one, and this idea of finding moments and nuggets and things like that, and you're posting all of this on Instagram, what has the reaction been with some of these people who are seeing this surgeon bouncing around, having a good time, obviously accomplished, but also connecting with other people?
I think people, of course they're seeing a glimpse.
Sure.
So the first reaction is, how come you're having so much fun over there? Why isn't my workplace like this? Like a lot of comments like, I just wish I could work with you. I wish I could work in your OR. And I'm not trying, again, to say I could be very stressed. I'm very serious, and I'm very focused on my patients and their safety. But it is invigorating for everybody, and it just creates a positivity. So I think it was like, I think it inspires other people to want to do the same things maybe in their environments, and definitely a sense of a little bit of jealousy that this is happening somewhere. Why don't my surgeons think of this? And, but all good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. That is all good. And it is nice to have that in the workplace, especially as somebody of your caliber who is not just a surgeon, but is also a dragon slayer, a mother, a wife, and has other responsibilities. So before, during, and after writing this book and releasing it, what has it been like juggling other responsibilities? And have you included your family in this? And how has life kind of changed since this book has come out?
Well, I really like that question because, so my kids are very involved. That's just the way that we interact in general. I mean, they've appropriate parts. They've read parts of the book, and they're pretty young, so they understand what only they understand. But I've definitely gotten them on board. I show them the videos, and I don't want to be taking away. And that is a fine line, right? You don't want to be spending too much of your time. And I think I was drifting in that direction to the point where one of my daughters made a comment, it's still important, even if you don't record it, right, Mommy? But on the flip side, it makes me do fun things like dance parties at home. A lot of it involves dance, and I'm not a dancer, nor do I want to say that I'm a good dancer, but I can groove when it's necessary or when it's going to be bringing everybody up. And There was one video that I did. It was that terrible snowstorm that we had recently where it was like everyone was trapped either at work on the highway. Took me 3 hours to get home. My kids were in a car accident. Well, one of my daughters and my nanny, and thank God everybody was fine, but it was not a good day.
No.
But when we got home, for some reason, I just kept thinking of that song, Cups.
Yes.
And I just thought, well, why don't I just get a bunch of cups and then I play the cup song and I just have my kids kind of trying to imitate and it just turned the day around.
Yeah.
So I've really had them try to buy into, what I'm trying to do, and also that they understand, like, mommy is trying to not be away from you guys, but within what I can harness, which is these moments, sometimes at night, sometimes with my kids, sometimes alone, sometimes at work, reaching my goal. Like, I want them to feel that you can't have it all at the same time,
right,
but you can find a little way to try to, make all your dreams come true, family, relationships, professional life.
So on Amazon, you have 65 reviews. I did a little bit of snooping. I did a little bit of research. And what I found was that among 65 reviews, you have a 5 out of 5. Now, as a surgeon, as a person, as an adult in the United States in 2018, to have 65 people agree on anything is nothing short of a feat. And to have 65 people agree on something so profound is nothing short of a small miracle. To what do you attribute that to? That everybody, and it is 65 people, that everybody is so effervescent about what you've written?
I think that, I don't think I'm some amazing literary figure, but there's just something relatable, so relatable that when you read the book, and I'm very proud of that angle of it, that it's going to resonate.
Right.
And I think sometimes when you are just so real and so raw, but not crossing a boundary of discomfort, where people are like, oh, I do not want to hear this, because I was really worried about that, especially with my male colleagues. I think that's when I get the proudest. Like, it's really amazing when a female, especially a female who's been through breast cancer, is like, I hear you, I've been there. But when it's like someone totally different, especially a male reading about a female experience that's very personal, and that they can still laugh at it, that's what makes me feel like there's something here that I think it has a value to the world. Like, there's so much out there, there's so much in television, and there's so much written that it seems like there's nothing new under the sun. What could you possibly produce that's going to get people going? And somehow I think I found something to do that.
You have found something to do that. And off of that question, is there more under the sun for you? Are you thinking about writing another book in the future?
I do want to write another book, and what the topic that is so close to me is, what it's like to be in the operating room as a female and as a surgeon, and as a surgeon who's been the patient. What I struggle with that is HIPAA. And how do you tell stories that are real but not recognizable enough that you're violating any of your patients' personal information? And even if you could mask that, is that too real for, a lot of the stories in the OR that are fascinating from the outside are the near misses. But they're very scary for parents to read about. And so finding that right balance of where the story's valuable but isn't too much to handle for my patients' families, I think that's what I struggle with, but I want to go down that road.
Is there, from what you've seen from other books and other literature that's out there, are there other gaps that you've identified with communicating medical experiences to patients, or kind of other things along those lines?
I think people have definitely tried to write about, there are doctors that have become patients, and I think that people do write about what goes on in the operating room, which is a big black box to most people. I just think that it's just a fascinating subculture.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I have the one difference, except for that it's the same thing. It's the approach to it, the realness, the relatability that I think I can, hopefully parlay into another story to tell.
So in publishing anything or in creating anything in life, we know that certain paths might open, just unexpected paths that manifest because we've opened more doors than we intended to. 3 keys, but 4 doors. And so for you, aside from the book that you've produced, what other opportunities have manifested for you?
So one of the earlier opportunities that ended up getting postponed a couple times was one of the law firms in Manhattan have a lot of these law firms and some of these corporations have executive coaching. And so they have events or luncheons where they have these really impressive professional people that are coming to listen to someone who's speaking about whatever it is that their personal experience or a motivational topic. And so a law firm asked me to speak to them. And at the time, I was really still very myopic about it's just about the book and the story in the book and, what is there beyond that? But like I was saying, how things evolve over time. And I slowly was like percolating these ideas of, what did I take away from all of this, right? Like now I'm 4.5 years out. How have I changed? How have I made a positive impact? How has cancer, made a positive impact on my life? How did it wake me up? And so in kind of organizing my thoughts for this talk, again, it kind of gets back to my brother. My brother is a lawyer.
Yeah.
So he said, you can't get up in front of 50 lawyers and not have a really articulate package and a message. And I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So, I've evolved this message and I want it to be really organic because you can't force these things.
Right.
And so I'm going to speak, now it's finally coming up actually after all this time and some rearrangement, but I'm going to speak in the beginning of January at this law firm D&G in the city. And then more recently, I was asked to speak for the women of Dow Jones Wall Street Journal, which I'm really excited about as well. And that's a couple weeks later in January. And I'd been thinking about, okay, now where do I go? Where do I go from there? And what I thought of was medical students, because these are the budding doctors. And one of the things that doctors need to learn when they're developing is, not just the medicine and the science of it, but the empathy and the understanding. And it's really hard to understand when you're on the medical side of it. And what if I could go into, let's start with the medical school I went to. I went to Cornell Medical School. I have a assistant professorship at New York Medical College. So here are 2 medical schools that I have an association with, and talk to the medical students about, the doctor becoming the patient and what is that experience like, but really hearing it from a doctor who's a surgeon and maybe developing some type of program or curriculum that I can broaden to talk to other medical students or pre-med people or even pre-med students or even residents, especially surgical residents, because we're so bogged down in the hard work of it all that we really sometimes lose sight of what it's like to be a patient. And so these are just like these really exciting offshoots that have nothing directly to do about the book or the book's, success, but they're extremely fulfilling and exciting.
With the curriculum that you just mentioned, are there any particular classes that you're kind of thinking about that you think might help enhance the quality of a medical degree for future doctors?
Well, the recognition that some of the testing even process, it didn't used to include a patient section, like a real life scenario section, and that with the medical boards, for example, and that was already started right after I finished taking the board. So it's built into the curriculum now in medical school, aside from just clinical rotations.
Right.
And I really have to brainstorm about it. I'm meeting with one of the, medical student deans coming up, and I think it's an idea in evolution, because it's only worth it if it's going to bring some substantive positive impact, not just, I mean, it's nice to speak at your alma mater, but
Yes.
it's not really the most important thing.
Right.
And also, it has to be worth it to take away from, any of my clinical responsibilities, because I feel like I'm doing something good for, the future of medicine.
Now, you have a website up to interact with your public.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the website, what you've added to it, what people can find on it.
So the website has, first of all, it has some of the book on it. So if you just wanted to get a taste of it without purchasing the book, that's an option. It has pictures that go with each of the chapters, so you could really get a visual for what you're reading about. And then it definitely has a link to all the media that I've been involved in. There are articles that I've written, blogs that I've written, people have interviewed me. There's a couple of radio shows that I was on that I really thought they had great questions. And so all that is going to be available. So you can really get the whole background story and have the book come to life.
So when I was reading this book, I kept seeing visual images, almost as if it was kind of a TV show or a movie for myself. Have you been approached, or is there any interest in turning this into a TV show or movie?
So a couple of times when I've spoken, someone has come up to me at the end and said, this would really work as either a series on Netflix or Amazon or as a movie. And I actually completely see it. I watched The Big C on HBO, and the weird thing is it was happening at the same time as I was diagnosed. The difference there, and that show was done really well, was first of all, she was given, you are going to die of melanoma. It was more like, okay, you have carte blanche to do whatever you want. Like, your days are numbered. So this is a little bit different. This is more about like, what's the story afterwards? Living with this in the long run. And also, different age group. Like, I was in my 30s with really young children, and I was a professional, not a housewife. And, the stories got a lot of New York City in it and lots of characters. And I just felt like there's, parallels, which is in a positive way, because that's what gets people excited that they relate, just like they related to that show. But I don't know. I already know who I'd want to play myself, but that's...
Who would play you?
Maybe like a Katy Perry or something like that.
Yeah.
Because of the hair.
Because of the hair. And her spirit as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Wow.
So I don't know. I'm really be excited about something like that. And I feel like it takes someone else who's going to take the gauntlet, because I still have to do my day job, but I'd love to, help out.
Yeah. Well, certainly your book has enough material for a show and a movie, and who knows what else in the future.
Thank you. You got to check me out on Instagram, because I've been really having fun with it, and I think you'll have fun checking it out too. It's Helen Back Book. That's my handle. And if you want to check out my website, it's also pretty easy, www.hellandbackbook.com. There's lots of pictures and videos and lots more background story.
Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.